In January last year, one number went off like a fire alarm across Wall Street. 200,000 jobs. The prediction? Artificial intelligence would erase up to 200,000 banking jobs in just a few years. Every outlet ran it, a countdown clock on an entire industry. So let's do something simple. Let's jump forward 12 months and check the payroll. JPMorgan, the biggest bank in America, finished 2025 with 318,000 employees. A record, more people than it had ever employed. Goldman Sachs, not cutting either. The cull everyone braced for didn't show up on the books. So that's it. AI was hype, the banks are fine? Not so fast. Because there are two ways to read "the bank got bigger." If you run the bank, it's a victory lap. We added people. But if you're 22 trying to land your very first job in finance, the story is the exact opposite. And the gap between those two stories is what this whole video is about. Meet Andrei Bonik, finance student, did everything right. And when he sits down to apply for an entry-level job, there's no human on the other side of the first interview. It's an AI. He's literally been coached to use keywords from the job listing and to make eye contact with software, so an algorithm will decide whether a person ever sees him at all. He's thinking about doing a master's degree, just to buy himself another year of applications. Here's the thing AI didn't do. It didn't take 200,000 Wall Street jobs. The banks are bigger than ever. What it took was the bottom rung of the ladder, the first job. And that turns out to be a far stranger and far more important story. So where did 200,000 even come from? Not from a pile of pink slips. It came from a forecast. Bloomberg Intelligence surveyed 93 banking technology chiefs and asked what AI might do over the next 3 to 5 years. The answer they published? Up to 200,000 jobs, a net 3% of the workforce, and mostly in the back office. Operations, compliance, the unglamorous machinery behind the bank. A projection in a press release in January, not a count of anyone actually let go. And a forecast is a guess about the future. A payroll is what already happened. The payroll said the biggest banks grew, so both things are true at once. And that's the part nobody quite says out loud. Because the banks didn't add people evenly. Listen to what JPMorgan actually disclosed. Total headcount up, but underneath it, operations roles down 4%, support down 2%, while client-facing and revenue jobs grew 4%. The bank didn't shrink, it reshuffled. Jamie Dimon's own words, "We have displaced people from AI, and we offer them other jobs." Goldman did something quieter. It simply stopped growing, held headcount roughly flat even as profits jumped. So the real story was never a cull. It's a transfer. Money and headcount flowing up the ladder, towards senior bankers and the engineers building the AI, and away from the bottom. And the forecasts? They keep climbing. The same kind of research that gave us 200,000 now points to numbers twice as big, for Europe by the end of the decade. But hold on to this, those are still forecasts. The only hard fact is the shape of the payroll. And the shape is, the ladder got taller at the top and thinner at the very bottom. To see what actually changed, stop looking at headcount and watch the work. Inside these banks, AI isn't science fiction. It's already on every desk. JPMorgan built its own internal AI called LLM Suite and rolled it out to hundreds of thousands of employees within 8 months. Goldman rolled out a firm-wide assistant and became the first major bank to hand its engineers an autonomous AI coder to grind through the kind of grunt work juniors used to cut their teeth on. Then, the Goldman CEO, David Solomon, said the quiet part out loud. There's a document called an S1, the prospectus a company files before it goes public. It used to take a 6-person team about 2 weeks. Solomon said AI can now draft 95% of it in minutes. And then, the line that should stop every junior banker cold. The last 5% now matters, because the rest is now a commodity. So whose 95% was that? The junior analysts. The pitch books, the due diligence summaries, the first draft of the model. The repetitive, codifiable work that the bottom rung was hired to do is exactly the work AI is best at. OpenAI even ran a project, quietly hiring more than 100 ex-bankers to teach its models that junior work directly. AI didn't come for the rainmaker. It came for the apprentice's tasks. And to be clear, a lot of this is genuinely good. HSBC's anti-money laundering AI flags 2 to 4 times more real criminal activity while cutting false alarms by 60%, freeing investigators for the cases that matter. The tool is powerful, and it is real. The question this video is asking is narrower and sharper. If the machine now does the first job, what happens to the person who used to learn on it? This is where the two stories finally collide. The record headcount and the 22-year-old who can't get in. Start with the hard data. Across the US economy, entry-level job postings are down more than a third since the start of 2023. And in the roles most exposed to AI, the drop is steeper still. In banking, a McKinsey partner put it bluntly. Some firms are reportedly pulling back junior analyst classes by as much as 2/3, while pulling the majority of their new AI talent from those very same young recruits. And here's the paradox he names. Banking is an apprenticeship business. Today's junior analyst is tomorrow's managing director. You cannot manufacture senior judgment sideways. The ladder, in other words, didn't get shorter, it got taller. All those senior and engineering hires. But the rung you step on first floated up, out of reach. And for the few who do still get in, the apprenticeship itself has changed. One junior banker in London described his job now in 3 words. Entirely about prompting. No longer in the weeds with the data, just feeding the machine and formatting its slides. So AI is clearly eating this work. Except, here's the twist that keeps this honest. Can it actually do the job? In 2026, 500 investment bankers built a test of the real analytical work juniors do. The models, the decks, the memos. And ran 9 of the most powerful AI systems at it. The best one failed nearly half the criteria. And the bankers rated 0% of its output ready to send to a client. 0. AI can produce the draft. It still can't sign off on the work. And one more honest thing, because it matters. Is AI really the cause of the squeeze, or the convenient one to blame? Banks overhired during the pandemic and are correcting. Deals slowed, then sped up. One economist calls AI a scapegoat, easier to blame than weak demand or tariffs. Even Jamie Dimon admitted, companies may use AI to cover up hires they should never have made. Nobody can cleanly separate the AI slice from the cyclical one. What we can say is this. The banks themselves are pointing at AI, and the first rung is the part that's vanishing. So the junior's job didn't disappear, it inverted. It used to be produce the 95%. Now it's own the last 5. The judgment, the check, the part a client trusts a human to get right. Which leaves one genuinely hard question. If the machine does the first job, where does the next generation ever learn the last 5%? Here's the thing. We have run this exact experiment before. In the same industry. With a machine that did a bank worker's entire job. The 1970s. A device arrives that counts the cash, dispenses it, takes the deposit, everything a bank teller does. The ATM. And everyone wrote the teller's obituary. Now watch what actually happened. Each machine meant a branch needed fewer tellers, from about 21 down to about 13. So branches got cheaper to run. So banks opened far more of them. So the total number of tellers in America grew for roughly 30 years. The machine didn't erase the job. It changed it. From counting cash to talking to customers, the human you actually came in to see. But don't make it too neat, because there's a twist, and it's the most important part. Teller jobs are finally shrinking now. The government projects them down 13% this decade. Only the thing killing them wasn't the ATM. It was the smartphone. Online banking, mobile deposits, a completely different technology arriving a generation later at a door nobody was watching. You can even see the same pattern with the analyst's own favorite tool, When the spreadsheet arrived in the 1980s, it wiped out hundreds of thousands of bookkeeping jobs and created even more jobs for accountants, because once the math was cheap, everyone wanted more of it. So the lesson isn't technology never costs jobs. It's that the machine rarely kills the job head-on. It transforms it, and a real reckoning can arrive years later, somewhere you weren't looking. Which is precisely the shape on Wall Street right now. Not a call, a transformation, with the pressure landing on the one rung that can least afford it. So put it all together. AI did not deliver the 200,000 job apocalypse. The banks are bigger than ever. What it quietly did was automate the first rung, the apprentice work that taught an entire generation how the job is actually done. And that's a real problem. Pretending it isn't helps no one. A bank can coast for years on the senior people it already has. But a ladder with no bottom rung doesn't just hurt the 22-year-old. Eventually, it starves the top. Because every managing director was once somebody's junior analyst. Here's the good news, though. This is a design choice, not a law of physics. Look again at Solomon's own line. If the first 95% is now a commodity, then make the last 5% the job sooner. Hand the beginner judgment, not grunt work. Some banks are already redrawing the Analyst program around exactly that. Bank of America still committed to 2,000 interns and 2,000 graduates this year. The work that's left for a human is more human, not less. The rung can be rebuilt, on purpose. Because the 200,000 was never a verdict, it was a fork in the road. AI is reshaping which Wall Street jobs exist and what a beginner does. The seniors grow, the engineers grow, and the entry rung is ours to rebuild, or quietly remove. The machine was never the real question. What we choose to do with the first rung is, and that's still our choice to make.